Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news. It is Wednesday, and there is a lot to talk about, starting with this. Let's talk about this Graham Platner controversy. Right, if you don't know Platner, he's a Democratic candidate in Maine's Senate race. He's kind of blown up online as of late, has raised millions and millions of dollars, but he's now found himself in a predicament. And it stems from this video that's now been widely seen from the Pod Save America podcast. And in it, you can see he has a tattoo, and it looks a lot like a Totenkopf for a death's head. Yes, technically, the death's head has existed in German military traditions for much longer than the Nazis, but ever since World War II and its use among SS divisions, it's been exclusively associated with them. And with that, you have Platner claiming that he got this tattoo back in 2007 while in the Marine Corps and on leave in Croatia, and that one night he got drunk and decided to get a skull and crossbones tattoo without ever realizing that the one that he got was, or at the very least, is very similar to the Nazi symbol. With him also claiming that he only recently learned about the resemblance, made plans to get it removed, and that also despite multiple government agencies taking a look at it. So for example, he joined the Army and they check all tattoos for any possible hate symbols, and apparently they didn't have any issue with it. With Platner also adding there, I also passed a full background check to receive a security clearance to join the ambassador to Afghanistan security detail. And with all of that, as of yesterday, it appears that he has gotten the tattoo covered up, with him telling reporters, going to a tattoo removal place is going to take a while. I wanted this thing off my body. And so you have all of that, that's playing out, but also it's not the only thing that's been playing out, because it seems like whoever is doing the opposition research here has been doing their job. Because in addition to the tattoo situation, there's also been a controversy around his old Facebook and Reddit posts. Posts and or questions around Black people's tipping habits, mocking rural Americans, and dismissing military sexual assaults. And regarding that first thing, he said on Pod Save America,
I was legitimately asking the question. I mean, that was the point of the thread, was to ask the question. Amusingly enough, I remember this time when I had first started bartending, and then I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was Black, who was a bartender, who did a great job of walking me through structural injustice and the fact of feelings of lack of agency. There were a whole bunch of reasons, and after that, I was like, oh yeah, that makes absolutely perfect sense. It was certainly not meant as a malicious thing.
With Platner later adding, that one, I must say, I was legitimately curious. Right, and that is, you had Platner trying to explain his past comments, saying they were made during a dark time in his life after leaving the Army, and he was still suffering the effects of PTSD. But also regarding his past and who he is now, you had him telling the AP, I don't look at this as a liability. I look at this as a life that I have lived, a journey that has been difficult, that has been full of struggle, that has also gotten me to where I am today. And I'm very proud of who I am. And all in all, this has been a very interesting situation to watch play out, because depending on where you go online, vastly different reactions. Like some saying they outright don't buy his story, they have questions, they're skeptical, some calling for him to back out. One of his biggest critics actually seems to be his former political director, Genevieve McDonald, who claims that Platner knew what the tattoo was and wrote, Graham has an anti-Semitic tattoo on his chest. He's not an idiot, he's a military history buff. Maybe he didn't know it when he got it, but he got it years ago and he should have had it covered up because he knows damn well what it means. But that also is, you have a lot of people out there believing his story, talking about growth and human change. But as far as how this is going to play out, we'll have to wait to see. You know, Platner still right now says that he plans to run, and he has the endorsement of Senator Bernie Sanders, at least as of recording this video. Right, and all of this is, of course, it's still primary season, and he's going to be up against two-term Governor Janet Mills. Right, and then whoever wins the primary, they'll go up against Senator Susan Collins. Yeah, for now, we'll have to wait to see how this plays out. And in the meantime, I would really love to know your thoughts, opinions, and reactions here, especially, not limited to, but especially if you live in Maine. Because that's the big thing about elections. Really, it's only your opinion in this specific situation that matters. The rest, it might affect like who or who isn't donating, public conversation, but that's noise, that's dollars, and then there's the vote. And so right now, I'm very interested to see what polls might say in the next 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. But then next up, we've got to talk about RFK Jr.'s Make America Healthy Again movement. Again, because it sparked a lot of debate and focus at the federal level, but maybe even more substantial as far as impact, it could be on the state level. And I say that as and because there's this AP investigation that found more than 400 pieces of anti-science legislation being introduced in state houses across the country this year alone. And we're talking about legislation based on conspiracy theories like fluoride in drinking water being used to poison the population, pasteurization making milk less nutritious and only really benefiting the dairy industry, and vaccines killing people. Right? And of those 400 plus, anti-vax bills were the most common. About 350 pieces of legislation that were introduced came at vaccines from different angles. Things like creating the criminal offense of vaccine harm, requiring blood banks to test for evidence of vaccinations, and instituting a 48-hour vaccine waiting period, just to name a few things. Now that said, most of these bills, they haven't taken hold. Only 26 of those have been adopted adopted in 11 different states. But that also doesn't mean that there aren't people at risk in places where herd immunity is compromised. Right in there, you had the AP pointing to 8-year-old Liam Dahlberg of Indiana, who died from a vaccine-preventable disease earlier this year. And according to his parents, Liam was vaccinated against HIB, but the other kids in his community weren't. Or because the HIB vaccine is not required for kids entering public schools in Indiana. And you had doctors saying Liam, who was particularly vulnerable because of his severe asthma, likely picked up HIB from an unvaccinated kid, but then causing his brain to swell and then killing him less than 2 days after he complained of a headache. And with that, you had Liam's father, Eric, saying, "I thought having the vaccines would protect our children. Unfortunately, it did not, because other kids, other adults need to be vaccinated as well in order for it to work." And so now you have these parents having to grieve the loss of their son while also ensuring that their other children, one of whom also has severe asthma, remain safe in a county with low immunization rates. And with that, you had Liam's mom, Ashley, saying, "There's no pain that is worse than the pain of losing a child. I do not and can't live through the loss of another." Though again, this is not just about vaccines. The AP also found 70 pieces of legislation proposing a ban on fluoride in public drinking water, as well as expanding access to raw milk. And again, only a few of those have taken hold, but there is still potential for causing serious harm. Right? In the case of raw milk, you see things like a California mom buying some for her toddler after seeing a wellness influencer share a video of RFK Jr. taking shots of it. And then after looking around online, she said she found a homesteader selling what they called clean and tested raw goat's milk. Within her daughter, Brooklyn, being hospitalized and nearly dying after drinking it, suffering 3 cardiac arrests and winding up on dialysis and a ventilator before turning a corner. And even now, this little girl, she has high blood pressure and walks with a limp. And so with that, you had Brooklyn's mom saying that making raw milk more available is dangerous. Saying, quote, "You're going to have the average mom like me that thinks they've done their research, think they're doing something to help their baby and end up hurting their baby." Right? And with all this, the organizations and the people pushing these causes, they can often be traced back to RFK Jr. himself. And you have most of the bills also being supported by at least one of 4 national groups connected to him. With those 4 being Make America Healthy Again Action, Stand for Health Freedom, the National Vaccine Information Center, and the Weston A. Price Foundation. And many of their arguments rely on the premise of staying healthy naturally and rejecting the idea that these proposed laws are based on conspiracy theories. But again, that's in the face of the extensive scientific evidence contradicting their causes. Where vaccines have saved the lives of more than 150 million people since 1974. You've got millions of foodborne illnesses being prevented by the pasteurization process, and fluoride in drinking water has caused a dramatic decrease in cavities since 1945. And of course, that's not to also disregard or cast away the conversation around levels. But what we are now seeing is the blatant disregard and even condemnation of decades of established research, and it's exactly why these are being called anti-science laws. And the growing spread of these anti-science laws has prompted serious concern in many experts, including Devin Burghardt, with Devin being the president and executive director of the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights, saying, "The march of conspiracy thinking from the margins to the mainstream, now guiding public policy, should be a wake-up call for all Americans. People are literally going to die from it as a result." With this being legislation being turned into law, I mean, we're starting to see states funnel taxpayer money into what's being fueled largely by conspiracy theories. And some of the things that you're seeing is, like in Florida, for example, it was just announced that part of their research money is going to go towards funding the study of ivermectin as a cancer treatment option. Right? And that despite the fact that oncologists and medical experts say there isn't evidence that ivermectin is effective to treat cancer in humans yet. Right? And you know, ivermectin, it became a huge talking point during the pandemic, with the driving voice behind it at the time being Joe Rogan. And actually now the continued discussion about it, this time in reference to cancer, can also be attributed to Rogan. I mean, you literally had Governor DeSantis' wife saying, "Mel Gibson was on Joe Rogan's podcast and he was talking about people that he was friends with and they overcame stage 4 cancer. We should look at it. We should look at the benefits of it. We shouldn't just speculate and guess." Right? The episode that she's referring to there got nearly 12 million views on YouTube and countless more in clips across the internet. And that is, if you don't know, Gibson's become kind of a big name among fringe medical groups and social media influencers touting ivermectin as a cancer treatment. And there I'll say, well, there have been some studies showing that ivermectin could maybe have anti-cancer effects. You've got experts saying that it is very far off from the grand cure claims that are being made. And so you've got oncologists questioning whether or not this is a reasonable use of Florida taxpayer dollars in light of other public health priorities. Right? With, for example, Otis Brawley, a professor of oncology at Johns Hopkins University, saying, "The shame is there are probably 3 dozen compounds that I can name right now that have scientific reason why we think they might be useful in the treatment of cancer, and we do not have the money to do the research to assess those drugs." Or with the mindset being, because ivermectin is such a big part of the conversations that are being pushed, it's getting more focused despite probably not being the best option. But hey, all that said, you know, the kind of long and short of it is there's just a lot more going on than I think a lot of people realize. And then there's more news we're going to dive into in a minute, but first let me say, you know, fall's here. Sweaters, football, and pretending we love the taste of pumpkin in literally everything. And as the air, it's cool enough, my schedule's not. And that, it's one of the reasons I'm leaning on HelloFresh, today's sponsor and America's #1 choice for home cooking. At HelloFresh, they've doubled their menu with over 100 meal options every week. We're talking heartier portions, new global recipes, and seasonal dishes designed by actual chefs. And the food, fresh, fresh, high protein, and loaded with seasonal produce and 2 or more veggies per meal. So you can pretend that you're being healthy while devouring something that actually tastes great. I mean, 91% of customers say they feel healthier eating HelloFresh, and 9 out of 10 say dinner's more delicious. And I mean, they have steak and seafood recipes every week at no extra cost, with 3 times more seafood options than before. And again, that's steak, seafood, no extra cost. It's awesome. Also, this is a me thing. I appreciate that everything comes pre-measured. It makes me feel like I actually know what I'm doing. It's the main thing. HelloFresh is my move. I think you should try it too, especially because the best way to cook just got better. So go to HelloFresh.com/DeFranco10FM or scan the QR code now to get 10 free meals plus a free item for life. That's 1 per box with active subscription, and free meals applied as discount on the first box. New subscribers only, varies by plan. That's HelloFresh.com/DeFranco10FM to get 10 free meals and a free item for life. But then next up in the news, Donald Trump wants to pay himself $230 million with taxpayer money. And specifically, he's demanding that the Justice Department pay him that amount as compensation for criminally investigating him in the past. And the people who get to decide whether or not he gets that money, they're some of his closest allies and only now have their jobs because of him. But with that said, this all goes back to before Donald Trump became president again, when he reportedly submitted 2 complaints known as administrative claims. So those are technically not lawsuits, but if the Justice Department rejects one, the person who filed the claim will often then decide to bring a lawsuit. Though in this case, it seems unlikely to come to that. But as far as the details, Trump submitted the first claim in late 2023, seeking damages for a number of purported violations of his rights, including the FBI and Special Counsel investigation into Russian election meddling and alleged connections to his 2016 campaign. He then submitted the second complaint in the summer of 2024, accusing the FBI of violating his privacy by searching Mar-a-Lago for classified documents 2 years earlier. And he also accused the DOJ of engaging in what he called malicious prosecution by charging him with mishandling those records after he left office. But of course now the DOJ is Trump's DOJ. And according to the department's manual, settlements of claims of more than $4 million must be approved by the Deputy Attorney General or Associate Attorney General. And the current Deputy Attorney General is Todd Blanche, who, if you do not know, not only served as Trump's lead criminal defense lawyer, but also said at his confirmation hearing that his attorney-client relationship with Trump wasn't ending. Right? And then the person who would be considered the current Associate Attorney General, that is the chief of the department's civil division, Stanley Woodward Jr., and he represented Trump's co-defendant in the classified documents case, and he also represented a number of other Trump allies, including current FBI Director Kash Patel. But despite all that, the history and the connection, a Justice Department spokesperson reportedly would not say whether Blanche or Woodward would recuse themselves from overseeing the case, saying instead, in any circumstance, all officials of the Department of Justice follow the guidance of career ethics officials. However, big thing, Attorney General Pam Bondi, she fired the department's top ethics advisor back in July. And so now you've got people like one ethics professor at Pace University saying, "What a travesty. The ethical conflict is just so basic and fundamental, you don't need a law professor to explain it." And then adding, and then to have people in the Justice Department decide whether his claim should be successful or not, and these are the people who serve him deciding whether he wins or loses. It's bizarre and almost too outlandish to believe. And with all of this, you have Trump, if not giving specifics, at least acknowledging his claims for compensation, saying,
"I don't know what the numbers are. I don't even talk to them about it. All I know is that they would owe me a lot of money, but I'm not looking for money. I'd give it to charity or something. I would give it to charity, any money. But look, what they did, they rigged the election. And as you know, we had, in one case, 60 Minutes had to pay us a lot of money. George Slobodanopoulos had to pay us a lot of money, and they already paid. They paid me a lot of money because what they did was wrong."
But then also, in addition to that, he seemingly acknowledged the inherent conflict of interest here, even admitting that it would ultimately be his decision.
Now, with the country, it's interesting because I'm the one that makes the decision, right? And, that decision would have to go across my desk. And it's awfully strange to make a decision where I'm paying myself. In other words, did you ever have one of those cases where you have to decide how much you're paying yourself in damages? But I was damaged very greatly, and any money that I would get, I would give to charity.
Now, with all that said, it is unclear how serious Trump really is about getting this money. But also, I'll say, notably, if or when he does, we might not even know about it because the Justice Department doesn't specifically require a public announcement when settlements are made for administrative claims. Isn't that so fun? Isn't that so cool? Honestly, at this point, I'm almost just impressed. Who knew that everything that I thought I understood about politics was just being propped up by popsicle sticks? But then next up in the new, Trump's guy, Paul Ingrassia, is out. But he's now officially withdrawn his nomination to lead the Office of Special Counsel after he told Republicans over text that he had a Nazi streak, among other things. Because like we talked about yesterday, that was just one of the controversial and racist text messages that he sent other Republicans in a group chat that was leaked to Politico by one of the people in the chat. Again, as we talked about, you had his lawyer both trying to frame his comments as a joke while also suggesting that they might be fake. But seemingly, you had a lot of people just not believing that, including multiple key Republican senators who announced that they would vote against Ingrassia's confirmation, with some even suggesting that the White House should pull his nomination in the wake of the leak. That is, of course, not necessary since you had Ingrassia announcing on X that he was withdrawing ahead of a now canceled Senate hearing on his nomination that had been set for tomorrow. Writing, unfortunately, I do not have enough Republican votes at this time, and adding, I appreciate the overwhelming support that I have received throughout the process and will continue to serve President Trump in this administration to make America great again. And that last part is important here because you have many wondering how exactly Ingrassia will continue to serve now that his nomination's been pulled. Because if you didn't know, while going through the confirmation process to lead the Office of Special Counsel, Ingrassia has been working as a White House liaison with the Department of Homeland Security. And at least as of recording, we've seen numerous reports saying that Ingrassia still has his liaison job. And so far, the White House has refused to respond to questions from multiple outlets about whether he'll be staying on in that role. With the question seeming to be if his Nazi streak problem is just too much for the Senate, but that doesn't mean it's too much to work in the Trump administration. The next up in the news, Arizona's Attorney General is now suing House Speaker Mike Johnson for refusing to swear in a Democrat who was elected nearly a month ago. This is now the latest update and something we've had to cover several times now because Johnson is still not sworn in Adelita Grijalva. And that after she won a special election to fill a vacant seat back in September. And of course, you have Johnson claiming, well, he just can't swear her in because the House isn't in session, but that's also despite the fact that there isn't any rule that says that. And in fact, Johnson himself swore in 2 Republicans while the House was out of session earlier this year. And Grijalva, well, she believes that Johnson is intentionally dragging his feet because she would be the final signature on a petition that would force a vote on releasing the Epstein files. In that petition, it would allow a bipartisan majority of members to circumvent Johnson and his Republican leadership who have repeatedly tried to prevent a full floor vote on this. And what we're seeing is that after threatening to take legal action, Arizona AG Chris Mays has now officially filed a lawsuit against the House Speaker, arguing that Johnson doesn't actually have the power to prevent Grijalva from taking office and asking a judge to allow someone else to swear her in if Johnson just won't. Writing, by withholding the oath and the office that comes with it, the Speaker has unlawfully interfered with Miss Grijalva's constitutional right to take office and the state's right to the number of representatives provided for by law. They're then specifically going on to accuse Johnson of actively stripping the people of Arizona of one of their seats in Congress and disenfranchising the voters of Arizona's 7th congressional district in the process. Now, all that said, Johnson, for his part, has denounced the lawsuit, calling it, quote, patently absurd and claiming that Mays has no jurisdiction. And during a press conference earlier this week, he repeated his claim that Mays' legal threats are just a publicity stunt, with him also seemingly trying to blame Grijalva for the fact that her constituents are not receiving help and representation.
Instead of doing TikTok videos, she should be serving her constituents. She could be taking their calls. She can be directing them, trying to help them through the crisis that the Democrats have created by shutting down the government.
Though arguably, that's a pretty stupid comeback, right? Like, that's the point Grijalva has been trying to make the entire time. She cannot do her job as a sworn member of Congress because he literally will not let her become a sworn member of Congress. And with that, you had Grijalva hitting back at Johnson, saying that she doesn't have a budget right now because she hasn't been sworn in, so she can't open an office in her district to serve her constituents.
But respectfully, there's so much that cannot be done until I am sworn in. And so every moment that passes that I'm not able to provide constituent services or be a voice for Arizona, I can't bring the issues forward that they sent me here to do. And so while, we're getting a lot of attention for not being sworn in, I'd rather get the attention for doing my job.
And to that point, you had AG Mays also saying that Johnson's actions here are causing real direct harm to the people of Grijalva's district, and saying, among other things, that she hasn't been able to help flood victims or people who need assistance with Social Security and veterans benefits. But for now, we'll have to wait to see what happens. I don't know what Johnson's end game here is. I don't know if he's hoping, he's like, Congress is old, maybe someone will die and they'll lose a vote. Because it really does appear that Grijalva will eventually be sworn in, and when she does, the Epstein files will have to go to the floor for a vote. And actually, you even had Johnson himself seemingly admitting this, with him telling reporters yesterday that he won't block the vote. Which I know the whole point of everything is they're having to go around him right now, but that is pretty notable for him to say. Because there's been a lot of speculation that Johnson would try to pull out all the stops to prevent the measure from actually going to the floor. But again, words are words, actions are actions, and we'll have to see how this plays out. And then we'll get right back into the news in just a minute. But first, your phone has basically become a side hustle for international crime rings, but thanks to our sponsor, NordVPN, they've got your digital back. A new report found that Chinese criminal networks have raked in over $1 billion through massive smishing text scams. Fake toll fines, fake delivery fees, all designed to trick people into handing over their payment information. That stolen data gets funneled into digital wallets and used to buy goods shipped overseas. And these scams, they're not random. They're part of a $1 billion global fraud machine that just keeps growing every time someone clicks a bad link. But Nord's Threat Protection Pro, it blocks phishing sites, malware, and shady links before they even touch your device. Its encryption shields everything you do online, from hackers, ISPs, and digital snoops trying to spy on your traffic. Add a double VPN, a kill switch, and a strict no logs policy, and you've got real security that doesn't depend on luck. Basically, NordVPN is your personal digital bouncer, keeping scammers and creeps out help before they even get near you. So yeah, update your phone, ignore those urgent text links, and protect your connection with NordVPN. Just scan that QR code or go to nordvpn.com/Phil for a huge discount on a 2-year plan, 4 extra months free, plus a 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/Phil. Stay safe, stay private. But then next up today, let's talk about the Louvre, because the museum's now finally open after thieves managed to steal over $100 million worth of jewels on Sunday. And this heist, it was a historic one, and it's also raised major concerns about how this could happen at one of the most famous art museums in the world. Because TLDR on how it went down, the thieves were fast, efficient, and they pulled this stunt off in broad daylight. So what happened is at around 9:30 a.m. on Sunday, just after the museum opened, a group of 4 parked a truck under the window of the Apollo Gallery, and then using an electric ladder that was attached to the vehicle to go up to the balcony where they used power tools to break into the glass windows. With them also reportedly using those tools to threaten guards and smash cases once they were inside. And then by 9:34, they were in the gallery, and by 9:38, they were exiting through the windows again to escape, with them hauling off on scooters. And ultimately, this heist was less than 8 minutes, and only around 4 minutes were spent inside the museum walls. And again, remember, this is all while the museum was open, so there were people who heard and even witnessed some of what went down. With this being such a huge story there and getting so much international attention, you had French President Emmanuel Macron calling this theft an attack on French heritage and adding, "We will recover the works and the perpetrators will be brought to justice. Everything is being done everywhere to achieve this under the leadership of the Paris prosecutor's office." And while we're seeing all this play out, one of the big things people are talking about is security. Because these people, they got a lot of good stuff, including a bunch of France's crown jewels. Things like a tiara with over 200 pearls and 2,000 diamonds, a sapphire tiara and necklace set, parts of Napoleon's emerald wedding gift set, and other pieces with tons of precious diamonds. Things that you might imagine would be heavily protected, especially since, they were just kind of hop, skip, and jump away from the museum's most prized possession, the Mona Lisa. But obviously, there were major gaps in the security, and a leaked report from a French auditor actually found that there's a wing of the Louvre where 75% of the area is not covered by security cameras. And actually, in the wing where this heist happened, which again is also home to the Mona Lisa, has 1/3 of the rooms where they don't have surveillance cameras. So I will say a big thing there is that the room that was targeted in this heist does have cameras. But still, many think this highlights a pretty obvious security flaw at a major museum. All while we're seeing reports that there were staffing shortages that had allegedly gone unaddressed for years, especially among security guards. And reports that unions had been trying to warn that the constant renovations, repairs, events, and more just taking place at the museum, it made it difficult to monitor and spot suspicious activity. Though this also, I will say, as some have argued, that fully securing the Louvre, it's not an easy thing. But it's a very massive and very old building, and with that, you had the French culture minister saying, when the Louvre Museum was designed, it wasn't designed to welcome 10 million visitors or prepare for these new forms of criminality. But still, you have many saying that the fact that this happened, it's an embarrassment. Or with, for example, the country's justice minister saying, we failed. People were able to park a furniture hoist in the middle of Paris, get people up it in several minutes to grab priceless jewels, and saying this paints a deplorable image of France. Right then with that, you had the museum's director getting grilled by the French Senate today. She said that the museum's alarms worked well, but did acknowledge that security camera coverage is insufficient, including on the site of the crime, and saying the only camera installed is directed westward and therefore did not cover the balcony involved in the break-in, and adding there are some perimeter cameras, but they are aging. They're then also calling the incident a failure and took responsibility for it. And then, as far as the investigation, the manhunt for these people, it's still ongoing. With the reported that there are 60 investigators on the case, and some reports saying that there is DNA that's being looked at and analyzed. Which actually brings us to something almost as valuable as what was taken, which is what the robbers left behind. Because in their escape, they actually dropped a crown outside of the museum, which has since been recovered, though it was damaged. And the police also saying it looked like the thieves intended on setting their truck and some of the other items on fire, but they were chased away by security before they could actually do it. And then as far as, what are they going to do with the stuff they stole, there is an obvious guess. Because they went after the jewels and not the art for possibly a good reason. Because with a painting, it can't be easily resold without it being recognized. But with jewels, that's a different story. But as one art crime professor explained, they stole items that can be easily taken apart, melted down, recut, and sold on the legitimate market, with it being very difficult to trace them. Though, of course, maybe there is a chance that the robbers have an interest in historical or artistic value of these pieces. But again, most experts right now think that they're just going to sell those jewels. Because even though cutting them down, it lessens their value, that's still a ton of money. But then finally today, as we wind things down, I want to end with congratulations and one more thing. Starting with a big congrats to John T., a winner of SeatGeek's weekly giveaway, right? John's looking to catch the playoff games. And for the rest of y'all, that's right. SeatGeek is still giving away $500 in tickets every week, and you should definitely enter today if you haven't already. You could be the next winner and snag $500 towards seeing your favorite artist, sporting event, or play. There's like over 70,000 events to choose from. And all you got to do is just add code DeFranco to your SeatGeek app profile for a chance at the weekly $500 prize. No purchase necessary. That said, the final bit today is a piece from today's brand new podcast I just released, Crashing Out, episode 4 now. Wow, that's crazy. Well, this week's episode is coming in at just under an hour and a half. Links to watch or listen on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts in the description. I thought I'd end today's show with this bite from the pod.
Speaking of being freed from a prison, George Santos is out, Phil.
Or if you're getting to this episode late, maybe Diddy.
I know. I think, I've been writing about this online. I think he's building a Legion of Doom. He's building a rogues gallery.
Oh, that makes everything make more. Oh man, and at the head of the table is gonna be the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein. He's like, that's the leader.
Well, in DC Comics, his name is Gentleman Ghost. He's just there floating. I don't think he's building a ballroom. I think he's building that weird Darth Vader head from Super Friends, and he's refilling. He's not draining the swamp. He's refilling the swamp, and there's a big Darth Vader head, and this is where they're going to edit in all these imagery for the YouTube video, and it's going to be Donald Trump in a Legion. He's going to be in a Lex Luthor green and purple, and he's going to be yelling at the Joker. And that's just going to be JD Vance. Your editors are going to have such a hell of a time putting this
They're
together.
like, we're literally doing none of this. we have two double shows today.
Do it, editors, and don't use AI. Do it all by hand. Get in.
Please don't use AI. I don't want to take that hit.
Make George Santos as Cheetah from Wonder Woman, because that's how I want.
I mean, now that he's back out, we might be able to pay enough to get a cameo of him just doing that.
You probably could.
But that, my friends, is the end of this video, but it's not the end of all the goodness today. I don't even know if I would qualify today's show as the goodness. Though, if you do want some goodness, I got that brand new episode of Crashing Out that just dropped today. The PDS is 90% news, 10% of opinion. That's the inverse of that. It's a great ride today. And then, of course, you've got the newest Philip DeFranco show that you might not have seen yet. With links to those on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, also in the description down below. But no matter what you do, let me just say thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.